this is where it starts. So the SpotMe Onomi Sync app for Salesforce. And by the way, SpotMe is the non-life science app, and Onomi is our life science app. So it's at the same place, and this is where you can install. It's a managed package. And once you've brought this into Salesforce, it will bring a couple of tabs and a couple of custom objects and actually some pretty nice code that helps with all the automation and the problems that Helen's described. By the way, people always ask us, if you think of a large enterprise Salesforce implementation, how long does it take? Actually, in our white papers, we have some guidance, a couple of days of sandboxing and user acceptance testing and configuration is typically what it takes to get it up and running. But I'm just going to go ahead and, share my Salesforce sandbox here. And I'm going to start from I would say, rep perspective who is just browsing, the CRM. They probably have other things to do, but for argument's sake, let's assume we have one rep here who's like thinking, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm going to meet Mr. Redfield. Actually, I have a meeting with Mr. Redfield, who is an HCP tomorrow. And so the first thing we wanted to share is that the way the SpotMe and Onomi Sync App work is that it actually brings all your event data into your CRM, but in a way that doesn't clutter your CRM data. So it actually creates all sorts of shadow objects that are available if you want to report on them, but they don't necessarily go and pollute your existing contact leads and accounts. It can connect to them. We'll see in a minute how it does that. But by default, it takes all the event data, brings it into the CRM in those shadow objects, which are all called SpotMe something. And then you can decide, okay, how do I connect and how do I make related lists? So this is what's happening here. And to contact, I see that Chris Redfield was actually a SpotMe attendee. So that's the related objects being created to 2 events, okay? And these are actually 2 very different events. And I'm just going to go ahead and see a little bit more, what's in there. And the first thing here to think is, as a rep, I actually have all the information about, when the person attended, what was by the way, was this person at registration time? Because we know often people register with other email addresses that we know them as, and we'll come to that later, on how this all works, because there's quite a lot of science in there. But in this case, the system was able to match, and it was probably matched based on the email. This was a virtual attendance. And now, and this is what a lot of event platforms and integrations will claim to do, meaning I can connect and can tell you who came to my event. Now, this is what really makes SpotMe and Onomi different, is the depth of the engagement data. So I'm going to go ahead and go in SpotMe attendee activity. And you can think of anybody who is on this platform, on this webinar today, and imagine all the things you've done, like clicking, downloading this white paper, watching the slide, responding to the poll, perhaps asking some questions. Here we're seeing exactly that. And this actually was a virtual event where we see all the activities with extreme granularity on what happened. And now imagine if I'm the rep and I'm going to meet Mr. Redfield tomorrow, what I have all these things I can talk about. I can see, okay, this is the question that, that this person asked. So I can literally, go in my field visit and bring up, with an answer or with some sort of, detailing that will support that answer. But also we can go even more granular. In this case, we have the feedback forms, which will actually be completely, in great level of detail, linked and made available to me. So I know, hey, this person would, do you feel better equipped? So yes, this person is actually in a positive mood to, vis-a-vis our own product. And yes, I'd like to have more Q&A. So I have extreme feedback with a great level of detail. And to my point earlier, all this data is useful for me as a sales rep. But imagine that if you're running a marketing cloud instance that's connected to Salesforce, which is the majority of what people are doing in life sciences, this is also great for marketers. You can start segmenting your post-event marketing, not only based on whether the person attended or not, but how the person feels about all of this stuff. And you can go in extreme personalization level. Now I'm going to go ahead and just check, because this person actually had attended 2 events. So this was a virtual event. Now this is a satellite session at ASH. So this is more like an in-person event, or satellite and probably a booth at ASH. And I'm just going to see, yes, he was matched. So he was reconciled with the master data. And here we have different types of activity because this is in person, right? So there was an appointment. Actually, there's a note from the person who actually had the appointment. He wants to have follow-up session on this product and on this unmet education need. But also he was scanned at the booth by John Taylor, who was the rep that happened to me on the booth. So here I have, again, this extreme granularity that provides clarity on like exactly what happened on the journey that this person has gone through for this specific event. Okay, so we have limited time, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump into maybe something else where this is the event view, and again, I'm still the rep here, right? I'm showing you what happens once the event has taken place. We won't go into the nitty-gritty of the execution. We'll go a little bit into the administrative part, but this is me as a rep looking at this event, and that's perhaps before the actual event. And so I have, again, all the information. I can even like have access without having administrative access to the event platform. I see what's the registration page. If I wanted to share it, more on this later. I also would be able to access the event console, which is on SpotMe and Onomi Backstage, where I can manage the event if I have the access rights to do so. But most importantly, and this is one of the things that people forget all the time about, is why don't you involve your reps in a very coordinated way in recruiting and sending registration and invitations to your event. And so we have this built-in registration tool here that's attached to the event. And this is for me as a rep. I can say, okay, I'm going to go into all my leads and I'm going to say, well, I'm responsible. My territory is actually, what state? My territory is NC, North Carolina. All right, so, okay, I only have one lead and a state, but okay, fine. I'm just going to go ahead, add selected record. And I could by the way, I could mass send invites here. And this is, again, me as a rep. So everybody can send their own invites without having to send this not so personalized emails manually and then make mistakes and then, not knowing exactly who was invited. And I can register it. And here I have a whole bunch of options. So I can send an email directly from Salesforce. I can silently force register the person, send an RSVP. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to say pre-register and say that I will send a registration confirmation. I actually have all the Onomi event email templates that are available here. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm just going to say, please make sure you register, or we've registered you already, or whatever the email template. So this is how I could sort of like handle registration. And I can do this at scale here, very quickly as a commercial or as a medical rep. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and jump into how does this work. And what you've seen is that SpotMe Onomi is actually its own app on this Salesforce instance, and that's really how it works. It brings its own objects, its own tabs, but in reality, it operates completely silently on the background. So I can show you a little bit how it works. So one of the first things that we've learned is that when you have an event platform and when you have a CRM, the biggest problem is people, like, if they have to do any manual step to bring events into the CRM, they're not going to do it, because like synchronization and integration, I don't know for you, but for me, it always seems like it's going to be a problem. So the way this works is that it happens in the background and it happens automatically. And this is what we call automatic event intake. And the way it's done is that you will set some filtering rules. So in this case, I'm going to say that all the Onomi platform events that are marked as external, they will automatically, audience marked as external, they will automatically get pulled in the background in real time from the Onomi Backstage into Salesforce. So that's the first thing. So we bring all the events. And as I said earlier, all these objects and all this data are shadow objects that will populate in your Salesforce instance, but it will not pollute and it will not override, it will not like create, leads and contacts that you don't necessarily want. So the first thing is bring all the objects and proxy the data into your CRM so you can really start doing some good work in there. Now, the question is, okay, what happens now that you've brought the data in? And this is where mapping and matching actually come into play. So you can imagine what mapping and matching is. But just to be very clear, first of all, I want to insist, in life science, we see all sorts of very different, I don't want to say exotic, but very different object setups. So it's not like this works with contact and this works with leads and that's it. But it's also that this could be any object, could be accounts, or it could be any custom objects, which I think in the case of Helen, she's using this quite extensively. But I'm going to go ahead here and show what it means, if I'm doing this against leads. So here we already have a mapping that's in place. So what we can do here is we could add more mappings. By the way, I could add other objects here if I'm using a custom object. But I'm going to look at that. How do we connect fields, between Onomi fields and Onomi activity fields into Salesforce fields? And this is specifically in terms of leads. So this is how it works. And I have to define like what happens, right? Is it on a create? A create is going to create a new attendee, is going to update a new attendee, and then which fields are going to be connected one with another. Now the question is obviously, okay, how do you decide, that John at Onomi.io is the same as John Mr. Nobody at hotmail.com, which is the email address that I could be using, and that's not the email that I'm using in the system. So this is where matching comes into play. And here we have super simple, I would say, matching rules where, in this case, we've essentially said, okay, we can chain rules. I only have one for now. But what we're doing is that we essentially say you only match on email. But what a lot of people do is that they say, well, if email fails, then try first name, last name. So this is where I will go and basically set my field rule selection. And if first name, last name fails, because it's quite rare you have the exact match, maybe you use first name, last name, and zip code, for example. And it's not rare that a lot of people will have 6, 7 matching rules that will be here available, so that you can make sure you have the maximum event reconciliation. Now, maybe one last thing as we wrap this, and I think Helen will talk a little bit about it. Campaigns. So obviously, a lot of this is how can we, run attribution? How can we understand the impact of our event? So the way it works here is that campaigns, which is the native Salesforce campaigns, can have this linked events that we actually bring. So I don't want to get too much into the detail, but this is how you can basically bring your events into campaign and basically run proper in-depth attribution that makes sense, especially if you are trying, like a lot of people doing today, showing the value and the ROI of events to your leadership.